If you would like to read this and other essays in the future, consider heading over to my website at thomasedgman.com. So as a disclaimer, I own Bitcoin, but I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist. Bitcoin has now existed for 11 years and was born out of the ideology of people we call cypherpunks who, among other things, believe the government should have little to no power over the circulation and/or the issuance of money. This group of people, many of whom are still active in the Bitcoin community, were talking about some kind of digital, censorship-resistant hard money. Bitcoin specifically, which is to say the protocol and code known as Bitcoin, was proposed by a mystery person who was, and is still, only known by their pen name Satoshi Nakamoto. So what started as a worthless digital thing, which was known only to a handful of people, is now currently worth about $8,000 and, in total, accounts for billions of dollars of fiat wealth. These days, Bitcoin means different things to different people. To some, like the cypherpunks and libertarians, to which I claim allegiance, it's a big middle finger to the government and the Federal Reserve. To others, it's a wildly undervalued long-term investment. Most Bitcoin owners lie somewhere between the two. So, unsurprisingly, different camps have different ideas of what Bitcoin's best possible outcome looks like. Regardless of what people want for Bitcoin's future, most would agree a lot has to happen before everyone, or even 1 in 5, people owns and regularly uses Bitcoin or some other type of cryptocurrency. As it is, only 6% of Americans own Bitcoin. The general concept of a purely digital currency is pretty straightforward. As it is, people never physically see the vast majority of the money they make. They are just numbers on a screen. But after you spend half an hour reading about the specific inner workings of Bitcoin's security and issuance, you'll quickly realize it will take you hundreds of more hours to really understand it. There's a lot to unpack that covers economics, game theory, and some serious math. It's not a weekend endeavor. And this doesn't even include the philosophical type stuff of why people should use Bitcoin rather than fiat currency. That particular conversation never seems to end. So you can't just stumble into Bitcoin understanding like a show you missed 3 episodes of. The only people knee-deep in understanding Bitcoin are there because they want to be, because they sought it out. Probably because they found it more than just a little intriguing. Probably because they found it important in some way. That being said, it takes only a few minutes to buy some Bitcoin. There's no entrance exam. You can buy it just as easily as you buy something on Amazon. Personally, I would prefer people understand what they're buying, but hey, mass adoption makes number go up. Despite my ideological preferences, mass understanding will probably not follow mass adoption. Financial sovereignty requires a lot of effort and care, and most people would prefer to hand off the responsibility of securing their money, just like they've been doing for hundreds of years. If all of your Bitcoin is in one place, all it really takes is losing your seed word list and dunking your hard wallet into water to lose everything forever. Holding and being responsible for Bitcoin is not for the lazy or faint of heart, especially when we're talking about large amounts. Adoption of a technology is almost always fueled by the adult money from the teenager who grew up with it. Mobile phones came out when my mother was a teenager, but they weren't in everyone's pocket until her age cohort had money of their own in early adulthood. Despite the fact that we're now talking about a fundamentally different kind of money, and not just a new smartwatch, we can't expect human behavior to change in that department. Frankly, old people will be old people. We should expect them to be hesitant to spend so much money on something they cannot ever touch, even though they will buy a stock or a bond without ever seeing the certificate for it, or buy gold in an ETF without ever holding it. Then the physicality isn't really the issue. So it must be familiarity, which is to say, history. People buy stocks and gold under the assumption that their value will not disappear anytime soon, if ever. Of all the criticisms of Bitcoin, this is probably one of the most justified. After all, it's only been around for a decade, while gold has been a store of value for millennia. I get it, Peter Schiff. There's no guarantee Bitcoin will be worth anything in 10 or 20 years. But for anyone who is familiar with the current banking system and the Federal Reserve, they should be amazed Bitcoin has been running nonstop for a decade and moves hundreds of millions of dollars per day across the network, all without a governing body or leader. Consensus and trustlessness is king. While trying to get baby boomers to put just 1% of their nest egg, a median value of $250,000, into Bitcoin seems tempting, it's probably not going to happen unless MSNBC and their wealth manager suggest it to them, which seems unlikely. Even if one were able to convince all 50 million of them to put 5% of their retirements into Bitcoin, that would increase the market cap of Bitcoin by a paltry 4%, much less than it already fluctuates in an average month. Retired Joe down the street isn't going to consider putting any of his nest egg into Bitcoin until JP Morgan or whoever, some, quote, real financial institution, is offering it, because that psychologically makes a difference. And retired Joe down the street isn't going to put a substantial portion of his fiat into Bitcoin until Bitcoin has existed for a large portion of his life, and he is completely confident it will continue to exist for the foreseeable future. All the while, JP Morgan or whoever is probably going to quietly buy Bitcoin for their own balance sheets while publicly shaming it, and I would expect nothing less. Financial sovereignty means less money for them to fractionally reserve and lend. If mass adoption happens at all, its most likely form seems to be rather slowly, via custodial wallets held by large insured financial institutions. So pretty much more of the same. But at least Bitcoin provides the opportunity to opt out of trust in financial and governmental institutions, and whose supply can never be diluted or falsified. Even if the light bulbs turn on very slowly, it's still better than forever sitting in the darkness.